There's been an increased demand for student loans, according to information collected by FNB. This is due to rising cost of higher education as well as living expenses. It's also noted that the funds are used to cover expenses including tuition fees, accommodation as well as textbooks. FNB Loans CEO MJ Davis speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time, MJ. Let's first unpack really the increase that we are seeing in demand in this regard.
Thanks for having me, Tumi-san. Yeah, so we saw over 100% increase in the first 6 months of our financial year. That's from July to December 2022. And I think we can attribute it to two main factors for students and their parents onto the FNB app. So there's a standalone application process now for our student loan product. And customers have really resonated with the process and shown, a lot of demand to take out the product. They were probably using other forms of credit to finance it before, but we feel that a student loan is the right form of credit to use for when somebody is studying. And then secondly, to your point, that as with a lot of things in over the past 12 months, cost of living has increased, so we are seeing more customers using a student loan to fund their studies.
And having attributed the cost of living in South Africa as well as the high tuition fees that students would have to bear along with their parents, one must ask what is needed then for one to be granted a loan facility, because you need surety, of course, that one is going to be able to service that debt.
Definitely. So we have a few criteria that we look at when somebody applies for student loan. First of all, we look at their credit profile. So we lend based on what we call the principal debtor. So it can either be somebody who's working full-time and then wants to study part-time, or in most cases, it's generally a parent or guardian who is borrowing on behalf of somebody in their household. So when we assess that principal debtor, we look at their credit profile. So having a good credit profile, showing experience of paying their other debt well is really critical. And then secondly, we look at affordability. So will they be able to afford the installments on top of their other credit commitments, on top of their other living expenses like food and transport. So we have a number of criteria that customers must pass.
Factored into the rising cost of living, MJ, is the increasing interest rates, which then subsequently have an impact on the lending rate. Let's talk about how feasible is it for a student loan to be serviced if we are talking about individuals that are already struggling with the tuition fees, accommodation and the like.
Yeah, so student loans, it's one of the cheapest form of unsecured credit. So there isn't any form of asset against it, so it is unsecured. So FNB student loan starts from the pricing is repo minus 0.5%, which is really competitive when it comes to unsecured credit. What we do when we do our assessment is we also assume that interest rates will increase in the future. So we make sure that customers have a buffer. We don't like to take customers right to their last cent. We know that unexpected things can happen, and we don't want to put customers in a situation where if interest rates increase, if inflation continues to be high, that they're in a situation where they can't repay us. It's not good for us. It's not good for the customer if they can't repay. So we try and be as prudent as possible when we are assessing somebody's student loan application.
Lastly, MJ, to what extent can this then be described as good debt, in inverted commas?
Well, we always say that using debt to improve your education, which hopefully leads to an improved employment prospects, and then likely improved income in the future. That's a great use of debt from an FNB perspective. So we encourage customers to use credit for the right reasons, but at the same time, an average cost of tuition now, including accommodation and books and living expenses, is over 100,000 rand a year at the institutions that we tend to finance. So we'd also always encourage customers try and save for deposits. The more you can have from your savings to pay towards it, the less you have to borrow. So putting yourself under less financial pressure. It's always good to invest in your education. It will definitely help, but it's always good to balance between savings and taking out debt to fund that education.
Thank you for your insights. MJ Davis is CEO at FNB Loans, talking to us about an increasing demand for student loans given the tough economic times that South Africans are facing.